Tengah. Bangsa ni telah turun ke bawah dan telah memanggil orang awam yang lalu di sini untuk minta bantuan.
Memaksa pekerja bekerja setiap hari dari 8 pagi hingga 12 tengah malam tanpa diberi cuti dan tiada bayaran gaji dibuat sejak 3 bulan lalu. 3 sekeluarga yang juga majikan kepada pekerja yang dianiaya itu direman 6 hari bagi membantu siasatan kes pemerdagangan manusia.
Perintah tahanan reman itu dikeluarkan Magistrate Siti Salwa Jaafar 11 pagi tadi di Mahkamah Magistrate Ipoh. Ketiga-tiga suspek berusia antara 23 hingga 54 tahun. Mereka disiasat mengikut Seksyen 12 Akta Anti Pemerdagangan Orang dan Anti Penyeludupan Migran 2007, Seksyen 55B Akta Imigresen 1959-1963 dan Seksyen 36 Akta Senjata Api 1960.
Human trafficking, described as the profiteering of humankind, has evolved into the modern counterpart of the international slave trade. Despite the fact that slavery is prohibited in every country, there are more slaves now than at any other time in history, and human trafficking is one of the world's largest, most profitable illegal industries. Depending on the economic prosperity of each country, it is classified as an origin, destination, or transit point, where Brunei, Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand are generally has become destination countries in Southeast Asia due to the economic expansion, which has increased the demand for workers in these nations, while Laos, Cambodia, and the Philippines are the countries that provide the raw materials. Source countries are characterized by a lack of industry, employment possibilities, and also widespread illiteracy, all of which push the individuals to pursue semi or unskilled labor. Human trafficking originates in Vietnam, and Indonesia normally will end there. The internal trade as well as international trade with several countries are covered by the region. Human traffickers act in a variety of ways, mainly in luring people with the hopes to improve living situations for a better future. They are compelled to engage in sexual exploitation, bondage, domestic help, or factory labor in their destination country. These gangs work in bunches, and they may even include someone from the victim's neighborhood. These victims then sometimes married and then transported to the destination country to be sold as slaves or even prostitutes. In some Southeast Asian countries, such as Laos and Philippines, this issue is very common, with the number of confirmed victims nearing several million each year and rising media attention on the topic of human trafficking. Governments and the international organizations are under increasing pressure to recognize and battle the problem. Although the majority of Southeast Asian governments has made significant initiatives to combat trafficking, such as drafting laws and establishing victim shelters, there are still some obstacles that must be overcome. Most governments lack the finances to assist these victims, and even if they have, these shelters or facilities are only available to women and children, despite the fact that males account for 1/3 of the victims in this region. Aside from that, fundamental adjustments in the way victims are approached also must be implemented.
The economy in Malaysia was identified as one of the important factors of human trafficking, as it had become the main attraction for foreigners to come to Malaysia from their home countries in search of better employment opportunities. The arrival of foreigners who wanted to work in Malaysia due to the rapid economic growth rate was actually increasing the risk for them to be exploited as victims of human trafficking in various forms, such as sex workers and even forced labor, especially if they had entered Malaysia illegally. This indirectly influenced the increase in human trafficking issues that occurs in Malaysia as stated by the authorities interviewed. This raised the issue of human trafficking because many foreigners are brought into work. The Malaysian economy, which is not only growing rapidly, but it is also stable, is also the reason why many foreigners often make Malaysia a country of choice compared to other countries in order to seek employment opportunities. Poverty in the country of origin, which refers to the poverty of human trafficking victims in their home country, is also a factor that has instigated a rise in human trafficking issues in Malaysia. Based on interviews conducted with the authorities, it was found that the majority of victims of human trafficking in Malaysia consists of foreigners who came from a background of poor living in the country of origin. In addition to living in poverty, they also did not receive job opportunities to change the standard of living in their home country. There are some studies shows that the poverty experienced by most foreigners in their home country is one of the influencing factors in the increase in human trafficking issues in Malaysia, for the reason that the poverty they endured in their home country makes them exposed and vulnerable to a high probability of being exploited as victims of human trafficking by irresponsible people. Due to their desire to get out of poverty, some foreigners are willing to accept any job offer in Malaysia. The poverty factor in the home country had exposed many foreigners to the risk of being mistreated by human traffickers in the form of forced labor in various sectors.
The third factor is non-military dangers can cause human trafficking. Human trafficking also arises from non-military dangers such as climate change, natural disasters, infection disease, and transnational crimes. Among these non-traditional security threats, human trafficking looms large, especially in Southeast Asia, where natural disasters and military conflicts lead to displaced people and refugees who are particularly vulnerable to the heinous crime. In Southeast Asia and elsewhere, non-traditional security threats have two defining features which are transnational and complex. The scourge of human trafficking, sometimes called modern slavery, affect some 40 million men, women, and children trapped in a horrendous web of forced labor, sexual exploitation, and coerced marriage. The data is taken from ILO and Walk Free Foundation 2017. According to some estimates, human trafficking is now one of the world's most lucrative organized crimes, generating more than $150 billion a year. Other than that, people are trafficked for various reasons such as labor exploitation or slave labor, prostitution, forced marriage, or harvesting of body organs. The fourth factor is history of previous abuse can cause sex trafficking. One group that's often under-recognized in child sex trafficking is boys. Male sex trafficking victims may have an even lower chance of identification. Our culture often pictures males as perpetrators of sex crimes and females as victims, and there may be even greater stigma or felt shame for boy victims that keeps them from reaching out. A study published by Love 146 indicated that male minors may comprise almost half of the commercially sexually exploited youth in the country, but they often go unidentified. The primary risk factors observed for underage male victims is homelessness. Boys may be homeless because they were thrown out of the house or have run away due to family dysfunction, including abuse or family substance abuse.
Human trafficking appears to affect victims in every part of their lives. At any point of the trafficking process, physical, sexual, psychological harassment and violence, hunger and abuse, forced drug usage, manipulation, economic oppression, and terrible living and working conditions can occur. Human trafficking, unlike most other forms of crime, frequently involves long-term and recurrent torture. For a variety of reasons, Persons who are trafficked are at a greater risk of contracting HIV, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, sadness, loneliness, impatience, and difficulty concentrating are all symptoms of human trafficking. As a result, other parties may struggle to comprehend the acts of trafficking victims, while victims may struggle to articulate or justify their experiences. To others around them, especially support workers, victims may appear uncooperative, nervous, threatening, rude, or thoughtless. The stigma attached to them as victims has been shown to have long-term consequences, including physical desertion by family and community, as well as maltreatment faced by the real survivor. Individuals' long-term impacts of human trafficking are complex and dependent on a range of factors, with no guarantee of recovery.
The initiative that could be continued is by using the intelligence-led investigation techniques and a region-wide network that provided by United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, which stands for UNODC law enforcement experts, to target high-level organisers of human trafficking and migrant smuggling. The recent UNODC Regional Office for Southeast Asia and the Pacific implementing the workshop is to strengthen regional law enforcement collaboration at the operational level. The results from this workshop is to succeed the identification of a hidden rest house used by migrant smugglers, the discovery of new smuggling routes, the updating of 24 arrest warrants, and the rescue of 12 victims of human trafficking with the support of police in Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, and Philippines. After that, even most of the Southeast Asian governments have taken certain steps to combat trafficking, like passing of laws, creation of shelters for the victims, and so on. There are certain problems that the government still need to overcome. Most of the governments do not have sufficient funds to help these victims. In case they have proper shelters and facilities that only limited to women and children, whereas 1/3 of the victims are males in this region. The government also supposedly not seen all the violators of the law and put them in jail for being immigrants, but government should identify on how the violators can cope up with human trafficking. The state should play a significant role in putting a halt to such crimes by enacting strong regulations, imposing harsh punishment to traffickers, and identifying victims and offenders. In fact, it is the state is the one that can assist victims recover from their traumatic experiences and rejoin society as respectable human beings.
The offence of human trafficking does not involve voluntary elements between victim and the party conducting the trafficking act. It also does not involve any form of reward and service charge like in the smuggling activity. Victim must be proven without force and exploitation in order to prosecute and convict. Elements of force and exploitation can exist before, during, or after the human trafficking occurs. With that, it is difficult for the authorities to take action in the early stage because it needs to be proven that the victim was exploited or not. Although it cannot be denied that smuggling activity is the beginning to human trafficking activity. This is because human smuggling offence often has the potential to be part of the human trafficking activity. Therefore, what the ASEAN do to overcome this issue is give utmost commitment and strategic execution so that it does not go to vain. The execution has to be complete and supported by systematically arranged law aspect. This is because without these elements, it is difficult for ASEAN to achieve estimated target in principle plan for anti-human trafficking. Every country must sign a memorandum agreement under UN so that the cost of rehabilitation and enforcement can be supported together. This agreement will allow the countries to be more serious about overcoming the issue Therefore, this activity can be blocked from the country of origin itself and reduce the burden in the country of destination and encourage legal migration.